Welcome to Tangi's Tapestry, where spirituality, law, motherhood, and relationships weave into a rich and meaningful discussion. I'm your host, Tangi, a mother, daughter, sister, friend, and an avid entrepreneur. Join me as I share my personal journey, explore faith based discussions, and offer valuable legal insights. Each episode is designed to inspire, empower, and connect with individuals on their unique path. So let's dive into today's topic and embark on this journey together. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Tangi's Tapestry. I'm your host, Tangi, and thank you for tuning in to today's conversation about powers of attorneys, advanced medical directives, and why they matter. Okay. So before we begin, because this is a legal topic, I want to give my disclaimer about this episode being for educational and informational purposes only. This does not constitute any type of legal advice, nor does listening to this episode create a attorney-client relationship. And just keep in mind that the laws vary from state to state, so it's very important that you consult with a qualified attorney in your state regarding your specific situation or questions that you might have, okay? So let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. This episode has been kind of sitting with me a little bit, and I thought it was fitting for me to talk about it because of some of the work that I have been doing through the courts. Um, over the past few months, I have been appointed as a attorney to represent alleged disabled individuals, and often what I have encountered thus far is some of the clients have been in capacitated stages. And so it led me to have this conversation about the importance of having estate planning documents in place, specifically power of attorney forms and advanced medical directives, which might be called a living will in your state. I know I'm in Maryland, they call them advanced medical directives. Back where I'm from in Arizona, they call them living wills. So these documents are really essential documents to have because it might prevent some of what I'm seeing in these guardianship cases that I've been appointed to. And so um, when you lack certain estate planning documents, your loved ones can find themselves being forced to have to deal with court proceedings. They might have legal expenses, and not even just, considering just that, but there's also the emotional stress that comes along with not having proper estate planning in place because your loved ones are then forced to try to figure things out because they don't know what it is you would have wanted, um, given the fact that your condition might have changed. And when I say condition, I'm talking about either your health or your mental capacity might change, right? So today I wanted to talk about the importance of having, a financial power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney, and even an advanced medical directive, sometimes, like I said, called the living will. Why it's important to have these documents in place, because it definitely is going to save your loved ones from the cost of having to maybe do a guardianship or the delay in getting, services and care. And just, again, that emotional toll that it takes on your family if they do have to deal with a guardianship, the guardianship process. Okay. So this is all about, education, helping you to get prepared, providing you with some peace of mind, knowing that you have documents in place so your family doesn't have to figure it out. And this is definitely not about trying to get you to be afraid or, force you into getting documents, but it definitely should be something that you take heed to. So, y'all know how I do. I give y'all a scripture that fits the tone of this conversation, and it's going to come from Proverbs 27:12. It's from the New Living Translation, and it reads, "A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences." Now, ask yourself, do you want to be a simpleton or do you want to be a prudent person? This scripture basically frames today's conversation because planning doesn't prevent hardship, but it can prevent unnecessary suffering. So, again, ask yourself, do you want to be the prudent person or do you want to be the simpleton? Okay. Um, And so, what does incapacity really look like? So, when people hear the word incapacity, they often think of, extreme situations. But incapacity does not always arrive dramatically, right? It can happen over a period of time. So, someone can have progressive conditions like dementia. Um, you can have a mental health crisis. You could be well and healthy and just snap and go into mental health crisis. It's happening often in this today's society. um, you could have a complication from a surgery or an illness, right? So you did have capacity, you were great and fine, but then something went wrong in your surgery, or you became really sick and then lost capacity. And again, in some of these extreme situations, you could have the stroke or a brain injury, or a sudden medical emergency can arise. So, in those moments, decisions often need to be made very quickly, especially if it's dealing with your medical care, your finances, your housing, and even your safety. So, if there's no legal documents in place, then your loved ones are often going to have to figure it out. And that is not always the best approach, right? Um, and your loved ones may lack legal authority. I often hear people think that because, oh, my spouse can take care of everything if anything happens to me. No, that's not always the case. Even though you're married, does not necessarily give your spouse legal authority to sign documents on your behalf. When it comes to finances and your medical care and things of that nature. And I've seen it firsthand that it happens. Your children may not always have legal authority to act on your behalf for certain things. And that is where they are forced to have to file a guardianship to get that legal authority to be able to make decisions about your health, your they call it your person and your property. And so, do you want your family to have to go through those hoops and hurdles when it could have been easily prevented by just filling out? Sometimes there's forms online, they're free. There's you might not understand them, so that's where the attorney comes into place. But there are forms in place for advanced medical directives and power of attorney forms that you can just fill out yourself if you don't want to spend the money, but try to do something, have something in place, right? So, before I go on and on, harping on you guys, let's talk about what these documents actually do, okay? So let's talk about the financial power of attorney. This is a document that's going to allow someone you trust to manage your financial matters if you become incapacitated. So this could be, paying your bills, managing your bank accounts, filing your taxes, handling your insurance matters, maintaining your housing, anything that's financial, right? And so even if you have like a business or something and hopefully you would have some other documents. That's a whole different topic. Let me not confuse you guys. Let's not talk about the business stuff. But those are some of the financial matters that you would want to have, that would need to be taken care of in the event that you became incapacitated. And so with the financial power of attorney, it can take place immediately. So as soon as you sign those documents, that person is going to have access to your finances. So that means you want to make sure you pick somebody, you appoint somebody as your agent who is responsible, who has who's good with finances, right? You don't want to pick somebody who's irresponsible with their own finances, and you definitely don't want to pick somebody who could potentially go into your bank account and wipe everything out, right? So you want to pick somebody who is who you trust. And the reason why it's mostly suggested that the financial power of attorney takes effect immediately and not um, at at the at the onset of becoming incapacitated, because you do have that option to make it to where it's effective when you become incapacitated, but then you have to go through hoops and hurdles for it to become effective, because you have to get a doctor to sign off on things, and again that causes delay. And so it's best to have it, effective once you sign it. So that way you don't have a delay in getting your finances taken care of, right? So that's the financial power of attorney. Then you have your healthcare power of attorney. This document allows you to name someone to make medical decisions on your behalf if you're unable to communicate or make informed decisions for yourself. So it's going to answer questions like who can speak with your doctors, who can consent to or refuse treatment, who understands your values and your wishes, right? So those are some things you want to be considering when you're deciding who's going to be that person to make those decisions. And then you have your advanced medical directive or your living will. This document outlines your preferences for the end of life care and life sustaining treatment. So it's going to talk about, what type of care do you want in the event that you become in a vegetative state? Do you want to be kept alive? Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want to be, provided certain types of medication for comfort? I mean, there's all kinds of different things that you can put in this advanced medical directive. Um, and so this will alleviate your family from having to make those hard decisions, and especially in the event. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember that Terry Schiavo case where it was her family, her parents fighting with the spouse on whether or not they wanted to keep her alive, and all of this craziness, right? And so if you have these wishes documented, then you won't have your family members going to court and fighting with other family members about what kind of care you should receive, because you would already have had it documented. Okay, so those are the documents that you probably, the three most important documents that I would think that you would want to have in when dealing with incapacity issues. Okay, so what happens when these documents are missing? Um, so when you don't have a power of attorney or an advanced medical directive, aka living will, in place, then your families often have, an option to have to do a court-ordered guardianship. Now, this is different for every state, like the what you have to have in order to do to get a guardianship. But I know in Maryland, I can speak to, um, you know, you have to file a petition with the court. You have to have, at least two physician evaluation reports are, completed, and there's a whole bunch of nuances to that. And I'm not going into great detail about all of that. Um, then you'll have a court hearing, and then you have ongoing court supervision that's involved, and there could be attorney's fees and court costs and all of that, right? And so even when everyone agrees on um, a, who's going to be the guardian, because sometimes there's a disagreement on who's going to be the guardian over your person and your property. But even if everyone does agree, the process can be expensive, it can be time consuming, and it can be emotionally draining. I have seen where the my clients, maybe the family member has filed a petition and there's things wrong, they're not filing things right, it's being rejected from the court, they're not doing service properly. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong because they probably can't afford to get an attorney to help them. There's just a multitude of things that goes on when you're dealing with filing a guardianship. And then, some of the things that I've experienced with people who are now incapacitated is that I've seen family members that are in conflict. I've seen delays in care or decision making. So because they don't have the legal authority to make decisions, there's a delay in what kind of care and treatment their loved one can get. Um, you know, the individual's preferences, because they weren't documented, they aren't being followed. Maybe they wanted to not be kept alive and they are being kept alive in a vegetative state. um, and then there's that loss of autonomy, right? That could have been minimized if they had some documents in place. Because when you are, doing a guardianship, although a guardianship might sometimes be necessary, it should be the last resort. It should be something that is lastly considered filing. It should not be considered as the default. That's the go-to. Like, you should have legal documents in place, and that should be the default. And then if those legal documents don't work or they're not in place, then you do a guardianship. But that shouldn't be the first option, because when you file for a guardianship over somebody's person or their property, they lose the ability to act for themselves. Like, the court steps in and intervenes, and it's not the least restrictive option. Like, you're going to lose a lot of your decision making ability when someone becomes your guardian as an adult. Okay, so let's talk about the emotional aspect for families when you don't have these documents in place. Beyond the legal process, there's this emotional toll that it's taken on by the family that is not often discussed. And so I think, when someone's condition has changed, they've become, disabled or incapacitated. Families are already grieving, you know, because of this issue, right? But then you add in the court proceedings on top of that. This is going to create stress. It's going to create division between the family members. And some of the things that family members I've heard say are, we thought we were doing the right thing, or we wish we had talked about this sooner. We didn't know we needed these documents. Is it too late now? Can we sign, the power of attorney on behalf of our loved one? Of course you cannot do that. Because the power of attorney is drafted for the individual who is now incapacitated, and they were supposed to have signed those documents when they had capacity. So they signed them, not the family members. So, I often say planning ahead is one of the most loving things you can do for your family, because it's going to give them, the ability to speak on your behalf, but they're honoring what it is that you desired or what your preferences were, and they don't have to figure it out. It alleviates that stress from them having to think, what would they want me to do, or if you have multiple children. Your children don't have to figure out and fight against each other about what, mom or dad would have wanted, right? So, who should, let's talk about who should consider having these documents, right? So I think sometimes people think, well, I have time. I'll get to it when I get to it, or I'm young and healthy. Nothing's wrong with me. But just remember that, these documents are not just for elderly people. These aren't for people who are just sick, like have chronic issues. I mean, but it's for any adults of any age, right? It's for parents. If you have children, you definitely want to have these documents in place. If you're single and you're not married, you want to still have these documents in place. If you're married and you're not single, you want to have these documents in place because, as I mentioned early on, legal capacity, or I'm not sorry, not legal capacity, legal authority isn't just given to your spouse, right? And again, of course, if you have the chronic health conditions, you want to have these documents. And if you are caring for aging loved ones, you want to have these documents. And then just keep in mind that incapacity does not discriminate, okay, by age or by income. The wealthy fall victim to getting, sick and lacking capacity. Um, and young people, I mean, we see it now all the time. Young people are having strokes and all kinds of issues. And so it's so important, especially if you are a parent of a young adult. You want to make sure you have those documents in place because even though you're their parent, doesn't necessarily also give you legal authority to act on their behalf when they become an adult. Okay. So keep those things in mind. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk to you guys about today was the importance of having these three documents in place. They are so significant. Um, you know, I always suggest people get an attorney to help them with these documents. But if you can afford to do that, at least bare minimum, go online, find the right forms, um, and complete the forms for a financial power of attorney. I know Maryland has a statutory form online. You can get that form. You can fill that form out. Make sure it's filled out correctly, though. That's why I say sometimes it's best to have an attorney help you. But I get it. Everybody's, times are tough, right? But you want to make sure that the documents are filled out properly. And get some documents in place. So if you can take away one thing from today's episode, let it be this. Planning while you have capacity, while you're in your right mind, while you can think clear, while you're in good health, it's going to give you control over what happens if you lose capacity, if you fall victim to, a health condition that makes you incapacitated. And then here's some simple things you can start with. Ask yourself whether you have health care or financial power of attorney in place. If you don't, you want to consider getting them in place. If you do have them, um, do you have the right people in place? You know, are they up to date? I know for myself, I'm speaking to myself, you guys. I always speak to myself when I do these episodes. I need to update my own power of attorneys because they are a little outdated and they need to be updated. So definitely make sure your power of attorney forms are updated. Consider whether your medical wishes are documented. Do you have an advanced medical directive in place? Do you have a living will in place? Do people know what you want to happen to you in the event that you need life-saving care or life-sustaining treatment? Do your loved ones have some documents in place, and do they know where they can find them, right? Make sure that when you do draft these documents, you put them in a place and you give them to the people who are appointed as your agents so they have a copy and they know where they're and or they know where they're at. And then make sure you're having conversations with the people you would trust to act on your behalf, right? So don't go and create these documents and just add somebody as your agent, and maybe they don't even want to be making those decisions, right? I remember when I created my it was from Arizona, so it was a living will. I created the living will, and I had in there, I did not want to be kept alive as a vegetated in a vegetative state, and I did not. I think that was one of um, my preferences. And my mom was like, well, I don't want to be the one to have to tell them, to pull the plug. And I'm like, you wouldn't have to, because it's in this document. And she didn't want to be appointed as my agent because of it, but we had the conversation and she understood the importance of me making that decision. And so I had added her as my agent, and now she's passed away, and so that's why I said I need to update my forms, because I have somebody as a backup and I don't want that person as my backup, so I need to go in and add my adult children. And so but yes, you want to make sure that you're speaking to the people that are going to be acting on your behalf, and to make sure that they want to do it, one, and that they can do it, and that you actually trust them, right? Because you don't want people, like I said, having access to your finances and you don't trust them. Like, that would make no sense, right? So and then if you don't have these documents in place, definitely consider speaking with an estate planning or even an elder law attorney in your state. I'm licensed here in Maryland and DC. And so you can reach me at turnerlegalsolutions.com if you are interested in getting these documents and or have questions about these documents. Okay. And so lastly, before we close out this episode, um, I think for me, seeing the consequences of missing planning documents, especially when I've been dealing with these appointed guardianship cases, has reinforced for me how important it is to have these conversations early, um, and how important it is to have these documents in place before a crisis forces these decisions to have to be made for having to file for guardianship. Um, and then just remember, planning does not mean you're expecting the worst. Like, I know it's so taboo to talk about these things because people think that as soon as they talk about, there's something bad is going to happen, but that's far from the case. It simply just means that you're going to protect your dignity and being able to choose and control the choices that you want for your life. You're going to definitely spare your family unnecessary hardship and even the expense that it takes to have to file for a guardianship when you could have done estate planning documents, which were probably far less expensive than having to go to court, because you didn't have these documents in place. So that's it for now, you guys. Thank you, again, for spending time with me and, listening to this episode. Make sure that share this with a loved one or friends. And then, yeah, that's about it. So I hope you're subscribed to, the podcast channel so you can keep up to date when I post new content. And until next time, you guys, be intentional, be informed, stay informed, and take care of yourselves. Have a blessed rest of your week. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Tangi's Tapestry. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Monday, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more heartfelt discussions, personal stories, and valuable legal insight. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with your family, friends, and followers. Your support means the world to me as I strive to create meaningful content that inspires and empowers. Well, until next time, take Take care and remember to weave your own unique story into the tapestry of life. See you on the next episode of Tangi's Tapestry.